A fellow pastor once reminded me that we stand on the shoulders of one another. His point was, the thoughts and understanding we develop proceed from those before us. We build on the work of those who have gone before us and from each other. In relationship to our study of Mark's Gospel, we are reminded that understanding the Gospel and what it can mean is the culmination of the understanding and meaning passed on for the last 2,000 years. On the basis of each generation lasting about 23 years, there are 85 or more generations that have gone before us who have recorded their understanding of the meaning and purpose of Mark's Gospel. That's a great deal of distance between us and the author of Mark. That distance is filled with a fog of history, a fog of understanding, and a fog of concluded meaning, all of which affects our present perspective. Mark did not write his gospel with the intention of it being read 2,000 years later. He intended for it to be read immediately, within the next 2 years, or perhaps at the most 20 years. As we read Mark's gospel, it becomes clear that Jesus believed the end was imminent. But the end of what? That is not entirely clear. Was it the end of history, of time, of an era? Again, we are not sure. What we are sure of is that this imminent end required an immediate decision to be made by each reader of the gospel. This decision was to be based on the ministry and teachings of Jesus as reported by Mark. When we read Mark's gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, if we are going to make a similar decision, then we need to be as clear as possible about what Mark is saying about Jesus' ministry and teaching 2,000 years ago. There is a lot of understanding and meaning contained in that fog between us and Mark. We need to get as close as possible to Mark's original understanding and meaning, and that ain't easy. Let's take a few moments to examine the particular periods of Jesus' mission and ministry as reported by Mark. Looking at the chart, first we see Jesus' ministry in Galilee, covered by chapters 1 through 10. This lasted a year according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but 3 years according to John. Second comes the last week of Jesus' life. This is referred to as the Passion of Christ. Chapters 11 through 13 cover his triumphal entry on Sunday through Wednesday, about 4 days. Chapter 14 covers Thursday, our Maundy Thursday with the Last Supper, 1 day. Chapter 15 covers Friday, the crucifixion of Jesus, less than a day, about 16 hours. The chart records the period of ministry, the number of verses contained in each period, the number of days in each period, the number of verses per day, and finally a factor given as an approximate percentage. The last two columns are a tool to help us measure what information about Jesus' ministry appears to be most available and or important to Mark. Let me explain. If we take the number of verses and divide by the number of days in each period, we arrive at an imaginary but useful number of the average words used to describe each day. You can see this on column 4, verses per day. We can easily see the number of words per day increases dramatically the closer we come to the end of Jesus' ministry. This is not a number that actually describes the number of words Mark used to describe each day. It is a number to help us measure how much material is either available and or used by Mark relative to each period. Relatively many more verses describe the last week of Jesus' life than the whole year of his Galilean ministry. Often we read that about 2/3 of Mark's Gospel, 425 verses, described his ministry in Galilee, while only about 1/3 of the Gospel, 233 verses, described Jesus' week of Passion. But 2/3 describes 1 year while 1/3 describes 1 week. Why so much more emphasis? Were more stories remembered or recorded about the 1 week? Perhaps. Was the 1 week deemed more significant or important? Perhaps it's a both and. If we think of each of Mark's periods of Jesus' life as a separate jigsaw puzzle, the chart tells us that for every one piece we have received of the Galilee ministry puzzle, we have received 30 pieces in the Sunday through Wednesday puzzle, and we've received 70 pieces each in the Thursday and Friday puzzles. Remember, this is a very contrived way of looking at Mark's gospel, but it shows how much more we have of the picture of the last week of Jesus' life. The questions are, just to raise a few, is this an emphasis that Mark is making for us? Is it an emphasis that Mark concluded as he first heard the stories told? Is it an emphasis that others before Mark were making?